the title of it, Love and Education. The topic actually emerged from a conversation from the first time that I met Joe in LA. We had the interview and he asked the question of what was the most important thing in education. And the reply was, it was love, right? Now, when you read about a lot of textbooks about pedagogy, et cetera, they do get into methodology and how to implement different systems in classroom management, et cetera. But the abstract idea of empathy and what love actually isn't really translated, not to my satisfaction, at least, right? I know some of you may be feeling the same way, right? There's a lot of techniques, but that was always lacking when I would do that type of research. And I find that personality and how we interact with our students is more powerful than content knowledge, right? Which is a close second. Content knowledge is super important because you can't teach what you don't know. But I feel like if you, the way that you interact with your classroom, even if you don't know, pardon me, the subject matter, you will still learn, right? So this is going to be a biological and a philosophical and a metaphysical discussion. We're going to try, and we're trying to keep it academic as well, right? So it's not too, out there, right?
What will you gain? A discourse on love and how that translates to our daily interactions in the classroom. Understanding of the levels of consciousness to ground ourselves. Sean will be doing parts 1 and 2. I'll then do an activity, mindfulness exercise, and debrief, which helps our students to reset. And Sean will get back into the levels of consciousness to ground ourselves, and he'd do parts 3 to 4. And then we'd have a second activity, thinking about how we think, thought awareness. And finally, Sean will be analyzing the chakra system as it connects to our daily experiences.
All right. Let's start by just discussing the concept of love itself. Oxford Dictionary describes it as an intense feeling of deep affection, right? And a lot of you may also recognize from Corinthians in the Bible, love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. And those last couple are extremely important when dealing with children in particular, right? Does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, pardon me, and always perseveres. Now, a lot of times in a classroom, you have to correct students, right? And because of where they may be consciously, first, second, third, or fourth circuit, and we'll get into that specifically, you have to also have a very short memory, because to get back into business, you have to be able to pull them back into the fold and for them to know that they can be corrected and it will not be held against them. So 5 seconds later, you get right back to it as if it never happened. But strong in the correction and not forgetting, right? The next one is it's a concept of Maitri, which also means love, kindness, benevolence, which is from the Buddhist text. Conquer the angry one by not getting angry, conquer the wicked one by goodness, conquer the stingy by generosity, and the liar by speaking the truth. Sure. All right. Also, one thing that we want to keep in mind when we go through the first 4 circuits of the brain and the first 4 circuits of consciousness, because we're also going to parallel those with different laws from Tahuti. Some people would say Hermes, right? There's 7 main laws in the Kabbalion. This is one of the books that we'll suggest that you look over yourself. There's a list at the end. One of them is polarity, right? This is the 4th one, and this also parallels with the heart center and the 4th circuit in the brain, emotion. This is where opposites meet together, right? 2 opposites are really just the same. They're the same thing, but they're different in degree. They just have different quality and degrees, right? We're just going to share a couple pictures here. This is an experiment by Masaru Emoto with water, and we thought it was pertinent because the body, depending on who you ask, is 60 to 70% water, right? And what he did was he took different glasses of water in a controlled environment, and he had children speak words to the water, and then he would freeze it, and then take pictures of the crystals that developed after these different words were said to the water. Now, this one in particular, this was done in Fujiwara. It's a clan that was in medieval Japan from about 800 to 1200 AD. They were doing, they have a temple there, a Buddhist temple. After prayers, before the prayer, he had taken the water. As you can see on the left, this is what the water looked like after it was frozen. After the prayers, he took the same sample of water and froze it, and you can see the crystal on the right side. So this is an example empirically that can be observed objectively that how the intent in your words do manifest physically in creation, right? The second one, similar circumstance, but this was after they were playing different classical music like Bach, Mozart, etc., left and right. As you can see, the fractals that emerge from the crystal, it's just replicating itself one after another, right? And this is also should be a reminder that it is more so the quality of people that is more important than worrying about the number of people that are going to grab on to a certain idea necessarily, right? If when you spread goodness, it spreads exponentially. Right? This is from Mount Cook in New Zealand, the one on the left. This is from Dianshan Lake in China. These weren't even manipulated, quote unquote, by an electromagnetic field, as in when we're talking about speech and intent, but these were taken from the lake in pristine natural conditions. And you can see what happened once they were frozen. All right. The one on the left, the word evil was spoken to the water, and this is what happened after they had taken it away from the experiment after a few days and froze it. The one on the right, the water was placed in a microwave, and you can see what you get after that as well. Microwaves excite water molecules in the food, which is what heats it up, and it's a natural process. And we got to be careful because microwaves are emitted microwave radiation. That's what emitted from the cell phones and the Wi-Fi, et cetera. These two are pictures of crystals that were frozen after the children spoke the words love and gratitude on the left and just the word thank you on the right. Now you can, it's a subjective, I guess, observation of which one you think is more beautiful, but I don't think anyone can disagree that they are awesome, right? They're beautiful, right? These are examples of the children speaking, saying, you fool, and you disgust me. Now, they're all erratic, no uniformity, no proportion, disharmony, right? Truth and peace, right? Beautiful. All right, okay. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to discuss the first 4 levels of consciousness. There are 7 major circuits in the brain, but we'll deal with the first 4 because of time, and because those are the ones that are really going to impact how we interact with the students as well. Right? And this also isn't to say that one works separately or at a time from another. They are all working together at all times, but one level of consciousness will and generally does dominate at one time or another, or over an extended period of time, or over a person's lifetime, right? And we will be able to recognize these things in ourselves, which is probably the most important aspect of the discussion, and also within the students that we're teaching, right? Okay. This picture is, and we're trying to lay the groundwork so we can understand, and you'll see the different brain circuitry, how they parallel with reptilian, bird brain, insect, and then emotional, right? These 3 here, they're almost indistinguishable. And a lot of scientists will say that these 4 nodes here are the gills, which were parallel to the fish. So you've heard things like we share the DNA of different, like a dog 95%, of chimpanzee 98%, or whatever it is. The point is that naturally we manifest the consciousness of nature, of all the animals on the planet. And that may seem like a grandiose statement, but when you look at fetal development and the way the nervous system works, we do have the ability to manifest the attributes of the animal kingdom, and being the highest life form on the planet, we can take that to a whole another level, exponentially. All right. The first circuit of the brain is the medulla oblongata. Right. If you look at the diagram on the right, this is the brain stem. And this is not even inside the head. This is not even in the skull. This is at the top of the spine, right? And this is important for the regulation of the fight or flight response, right? You know, when something isn't safe, you really don't have time to think about it. Your brain stem is going to react, and that adrenaline starts going, and you out. You're either going to run or you're going to fight, right? This is called the reptilian brain. And if you, because of the time, some things I just couldn't put in there, but if you go research what a reptile brain looks like, insect brain, you'll see the parallels in the human brain. But then it's just that towards the end, the human brain shrouds that with a much more sophisticated organ towards the top. And this will parallel to the seventh law in the Kabbalion, right? And which is gender. All right, the first circuit, the medulla oblongata, as we said, fight or flight response, what is safe and unsafe. You know, you might see sometimes people might have 10 door locks on their door, their front door, because it's not that they don't use that intellect or that group response or that emotional response, is that on certain things they're dominated by the reptilian fight or flight mechanism, that type of consciousness, right? Reptilians are usually, or reptiles and reptilian type consciousness is usually solitary. They only congregate for mating or defense, right? So you can see a child in the classroom like that. They'll sit by themselves at all times. They'll sit in the back of the class. They might be highly intelligent, but they're afraid to ask questions. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to recognize where they are in their primary mode of consciousness so that we can focus on making them feel safe, right? Because these are polarities, right? We have to focus on them having that safety net and being comfortable enough to know that even if they ask that question and they make a mistake, that it's okay. And you help that process by modeling what it's like to make a mistake when you think aloud. And we cannot be afraid to do that as well, because, you know, we're modeling the whole process. And interestingly enough, a drug that interacts with the reptilian brain is alcohol. You know, if you ever heard, let me stop. I don't know. Well, I've had a drink or two, right? And I know a lot of people, you know, when they drink, they tend to tell the truth or they lose their inhibitions, right? And this is directly related to that reptilian brain, right? Right. Second circuit. This is the pons, and this is right above the medulla, right? We're getting more towards the skull, but you know, right there in the middle there. This is called the insect brain, and the reason why it's called the insect brain is because it's just a way to describe the level of consciousness. This is where groupthink is more prevalent. All right. Insects realize that if they work together, they will be able to increase their quality of life. Right. Right. If you look at an ant farm or even a beehive, right, every insect has a specific role. And if you look at an ant farm as well, you know, when an ant goes out to get food, when they come back, if they don't have that food, they'll take their head off. All right, because they have an agreement that we perform this role and we all eat off of it. We all benefit from this, and this is what we're going to do. Now, keep in mind, the group dynamic in this respect does not have camaraderie built into it. It has nothing to do with emotion, because we're going to get to the fourth circuit, which deals with emotion. But at this level, emotion is not present. This is just about the group dynamic and group think, the hive mind, some people would call it. Pardon me. Physiologically, this would control walking, touching, swallowing, speaking, and balance. Now, these are conscious actions that after you develop the muscle memory, you don't have to think about it, but it is something that you have to acclimate yourself to, right? You don't just wake up and walk as a baby, right? When you walk, when you speak, you do have to process it first, but it's not something that takes massive amounts of brain power, but it is a function that does have to be learned, right? Sort of like the regimentation of a hive, right, or an ant farm. This would parallel to the sixth law of cause and effect, and this can be found in the Kabbalion as well, K-Y-B-A-L-I-O-N. And if you write anything down, this will be written on the last slide as well. Effect, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything happens according to law. Chance is a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. That's just a fancy way of saying that everything happens for a reason, all right? And if you think about the group dynamic, people are, think of a chessboard. A piece moves because, for lack of a better term, a king decides it should go to a certain place. And in that group dynamic, that piece doesn't even have to know why, they just do it, right? So in a classroom, there are aspects of certain things like classroom management where not necessarily every single detail is explained to students, and they have to perform as a group for things to move efficiently and to function properly. That is necessary, right? But again, as we mentioned, all four circuits do have a symbiotic relationship. So as they learn their roles, they have to feel safe. That first circuit has to be taken care of. They have to feel safe, right? And then they'll be more prone and more accepting of the group dynamic, right? One thing builds on the other. All right. Yes, student, yeah, we take this. Next.
Okay. All right, so we're getting into our mindfulness exercise. Thank you so much, John, which really helps us to bring everything in, particularly when our class, goes, they're talking too much, they get disrupted. It helps us to get centered and get focused. And this is literally a 2-minute exercise that we could try together. And it was adapted from Siegel, Williams, and Teasdale's 2002 book, page 184, on mindfulness and psychotherapy. We also want to be aware that mindfulness has been proven to increase our empathy, which is really, really useful, not only in these times, but for our students. Okay, so we're going to bring ourselves into the present moment by deliberately adopting an erect and dignified posture. If possible, close your eyes and then ask, it's okay, close your eyes and then ask yourself, what is my experience right now in thoughts, in feeling, and in bodily sensations? Just acknowledge without judgment and register your experience, even if it is unwanted. And that simple exercise helps with just getting ourselves back into the here and now and back into focusing on the next session for our class, the next lesson. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tonia. I just wanted to mention something about this second circuit again, just to make it more applicable to the classroom as well. One example of how to implement this is it's like when you have a role for each student, like a timer, a homework collector, a note taker, an attendance taker, or someone to manage the flow. I did an activity one time where, and this came from the lesson planner books and not bars, right, out of Oakland. And what we did is we had a court case where we were trying to figure out who was the who was the main culprit in the illegal drug trafficking, right? So we had the students representing farmers, street dealers, government, buyers, and bankers. Now, keep in mind, there was a ship that got seized last year in Philadelphia port that was owned by J.P. Morgan, that had over $1 billion worth of cocaine. So we know that we have the common sense to understand these things, but in order to bring it to a classroom, you have to be able to show that type of proof and that type of evidence. So we gave the students these roles, and they went to research them, and then they had the court case in class, right? They were all lawyers for their different clients, right? And that was a very group-oriented activity where everyone had a regimented role, but they felt safe to express themselves as we practiced, and they felt safe because they did the research and the homework, and it was facilitated, right? They had to use third circuit, which we're about to get to, which is intellect, in order to do the research, to process it, and to distill it into a sort of dialogue that could be processed by the audience, right? And then also the care for it, because the fourth circuit emotion, which deals with of course, the extremes of love and hate, which can be transmuted from one to the next. And we want love to be the focus, obviously. For them to have love for self and kind in the situation that these people find themselves in, they had to do the work justice, right? Let's go to, let's see, third circuit, right? Okay, third circuit is the cerebellum, all right? This is, in Latin, it means little brain, right? So this performs a lot of key functions, right? But it's also called or nicknamed the bird brain, interestingly enough, right? People call people bird brains, but this is where the intellect, much of the intellect is housed within the brain, right? Oftentimes, teachers can get into a mode where they explain something in a way that they understand it, right? But in order to really engage the intellect of the students, we have to, this is where content knowledge obviously is so important, because you have to be able to approach a subject from different angles in order to stimulate the mind of a student who may not be, they're not used to the process of knowledge discovery as you are. And they may not, they don't understand the amount of trial and error that it takes to know how to make a mistake and learn from that within that process. So in that modeling, and you have to model out loud, think aloud, and show them different aspects and different angles to see things, right? This is the ability to reason and understand objectively, right? Subjective type of observation is more into an emotional quality, right? This cerebellum also deals with intellect, of course, A plus B equals C, right? Deduction, where you can extrapolate knowledge from a fact. Induction, where you take a group of facts and you form a generalized conclusion as well. The cerebellum deals with motor control, attention, language, and electroreception, right? Now, this goes back to Masaru Emoto's experiment with the water. Electroreception describes an animal's ability to detect weak electric fields generated by animals themselves and other animals. So it's a proven fact that we give off vibration. This is not hocus pocus, right? And we know this because we feel it. We give off vibration, other people give off vibrations, and we are acclimated to those for different reasons, right? The third circuit is one of the ways that is the main place where we can detect and determine whether that vibration is for us or what we want to do with it, right? If it's so extreme that the first circuit says this is not a safe time to go, that's a whole other story. But in the third circuit, we can process the information outside of us, right? And then we can determine what we want to do with that moving forward. Now, again, one of the drugs that interacts with the third circuit will be cocaine, right? And that can parallel with the intellect, because this is where you get ego trips, right? People sometimes they'll get high on cocaine and they'll do things that make, they'll jump off of stuff because they feel like they're Superman. Because they whatever in the antithesis of logic or intuition, not a logic, pardon me, of intuition, intellectuals don't feel like something is real unless you can prove it to them through research, right? Unless you can show facts to them that it does not exist, right? It's a shame, because as we know through the cerebellum, truth and the experiment as well, Emoto's experiment, truth resonates at a certain frequency, right? And it's possible to feel when something is correct, right? But once we convince ourselves to things like pop culture, like what does love have to do with it, etc. Once we convince ourselves that this is not the case, then these faculties in our brain will atrophy and shut down, and you will not be able to tell whether something feels right. People will be able to tell you what is correct, right? And I'm not preaching to anyone. I'm just, pardon me. So
It's okay.
It's a little passion, right? This parallels with the fifth law of Tahuti of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Now, this parallels to intellect, because now we understand not only is there a cause and effect, but through observation, we can see trends, and we make predictions, right? So we know we can process information, right? Now, in the classroom, an example of this is giving directions. When you give a test, your directions have to be clear enough that a student does not have to read them 2, 3, 4, 5 times and ask 10 questions to try to. An example of a student I was helping out, and the directions were not outlined properly in the instructions for the quiz. Now, one, the student obviously is not going to feel safe with not being able to determine what has to be done on that quiz. And they may even feel ostracized. They want to know, is my test the only one behaving like this, right? And they definitely won't be able to use their own intellect because the directions are not clear, right? All right. So let's just move on to the next circuit. All right, fourth circuit. All right. Can everyone hear me? Can we hear? Am I okay? Thumbs up.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, cool. All right. Okay. All right.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. Fourth circuit is the occipital lobe in the back of. Now we're in the cerebellum, right? And in the Bible, it's called when sometimes they say you'll find the word cherubim or certain angels, and this is actually parallel to the anatomy in the body. There's a book called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. It's really good. I mean, if anybody's interested in that type of stuff. For the fourth circuit, the occipital lobe, right? This is where emotion really starts to take place. This parallels with the heart center. The thymus gland in the heart is a very dense electromagnetic area in the body. Also, as well as the fourth law in the Kabbalion of polarity, where opposites meet. And we'll get into a diagram of the chakra system where there's, some people say there's thousands of chakras on the body. There's 7 major chakras that go up the spine. In the middle of the heart center, there's 3 below and there's 3 up top. So this is where that consciousness gets balanced. A lot of Native Americans have a saying where they say, you calculate a decision in your head, but you decide with your heart, right? And the heart, as we say, is knowingness and balance, right? Okay, this is where we process emotions. Now, physiologically, vision, shapes, color, movement, and interprets the things that we see, occipital, right? Now, we also know that the things that we record in our brain, when they have that emotional connection, the memory of it is that much more vivid. And we call them time stamps in our lives or watershed moments. A certain song that you hear at a certain time is going to bring you right back to that moment, right? That's an emotional quality. Emotion, you take, when you break the word up, electricity in motion, right? These different, and we'll get into the endocrine system as well briefly, because this is where the energy centers are that correspond to the chakras, the glandular system, right? These glands let out hormone, which some ancient cultures would call chemical ether, right? Emotion and thoughts are a physical reality. They are non-local, right? But then they're transformed by the brain into a more dense form until they are turned into hormones and they become physical and turn into feelings, etc. Right? Knowledge is a chemical reality. And this is where you get neurotransmitters, etc. Right? There's supposedly six that they admit to, and then but four major neurotransmitters. Pop culture, unfortunately, as oh man, pop culture, in my opinion, is very debased in general. It is used to keep our consciousness at those primarily the first circuit, then into the second, because it's expedient to get people to participate in a group think. And then with the third circuit, this is a lot of times reserved for those that are consciously and then actively willing to go out and attain knowledge, right? And then the fourth circuit of emotion is not really promoted in pop culture, right? Love is definitely not promoted in pop culture necessarily. I remember when I was growing up, you listen to R&B, and then it might, and there's some good love songs out there too, quote unquote, right? But it's a lot more materialistic now. Hip hop is trash, R&B is garbage. Most of the things on the radio, it's trash, right? Unfortunately, there's good stuff out there, but you have to look for it. I'm talking about mainstream, what's being fed to people that don't engage even the third circuit. Because if you're using third circuit and intellect, you want to know for yourself what is available, right? You're going to do that research and say to yourself, oh, wow, you know what? I don't like this music. There has to be, since I don't like it, there's another person that doesn't like it. Someone must be producing what I like. Now, if you're not gauging in third circuit, you are primarily in first and second circuit. So if you have students that are listening to NBA Youngboy all day, and they think it's the truth, right? Unfortunately, they are definitely participating in that group think, but this is our job to expose them to other possibilities. Just the exposure itself will engage third and fourth circuit, right? This is the ability of knowing and feeling kinesthetically what's going on around the world. Now that, at the risk of sounding magical, it is magical, but we all can watch TV and see something that's happening in Afghanistan and have an empathetic reaction to it. And you can feel it physically, right? Now, if you are in tune with this fourth circuit, and the brain is a transmitter and receiver of vibrational energy. We proved that already with the cerebellum. When this is more in tune, you are more in tune with other people. The most important thing is to recognize these qualities in ourselves, and you will be able to see it in the students, and we'll know how to engage with them, right? The drug, quote unquote, that interacts with the fourth circuit most famously is marijuana or cannabis. Now, the ability to get actual natural marijuana out here is extremely difficult, right? Natural THC levels are around 7% something, the CBD 3 to 4. The CBD oil, the cannabinoid oil, naturally counteracts the damage that the THC does to the THC receptors in the brain. But what they're doing now with the hybridized marijuana, that THC shoots up to 25% and higher. Some you get 50 and more, and the CBD is taken down to about 1%. You're killing your brain, right? So it's full. I went to school in Iowa State as an agricultural engineering school. I already know what they were doing with the marijuana. Okay, the experiments were being done to raise the THC to lower the cannabinoid. Now you can buy CBD oil, but what unfortunately what our kids are smoking is not it's not healthy. Now this corresponds with the fourth law. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has pair of opposites. Alike and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, etc., etc., etc. Paradoxes may be reconciled, right? If you're in a situation where you might feel like this student is totally intractable, right? They don't respond to anything, right? They don't follow directions, quote unquote, oppositional defiant disorder. We have to understand that they're not being engaged. They're definitely not getting love. So they're not being engaged at the fourth circuit or even the third circuit, because if they were engaged in their intellect, they would be able to observe you and know that you had certain intentions. So you have to start with the first circuit in terms of safety. The group dynamic has to be fair and just, and you can bring them up more into the intellectual process. You can't expect a kid to start doing calculus if they don't even trust you.
Yeah.
Right? Let's see, let's go to the next one. Okay, next activity.
Okay, so this with this activity, we're thinking about our thinking, and it has to do with cognitive behavioral therapy, or just it's based on Aaron Beck's work. And so here we look at 4 types just because of time: negative predicting, and P. Number 2, low frustration tolerance. You know how to close this down?
I can minimize it.
Minimize it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Emotional reasoning, ER. Negative mind reading, NMR. And what we're going to do, just to give you an opportunity to practice within our chat, if you could click on our chat, you could practice these reframing sentences. And it's going to work within the classroom setting when we have to reframe our own approach, or for example, instead of choosing very carefully how we're going to word things to help our students understand where we're coming from or what we really want them to get from their particular lesson or learning opportunity. Identify the unhelpful thoughts by placing either NP, LFT, ER, or NMR next to the sentence. Then reframe the statements in a more positive or realistic way and problem-solving way. So the first one we have, some of my students are easily distracted. I really can't deal with this. What do you think are some possible unhelpful thinking styles around that sentence? So you could feel free to write in the group chat and see if you're able to reframe the statement in a more positive, realistic way, and even in a way that helps to solve the problem. I'm going to take a look at the chat to see. Definitely LFT, yes. There's no point to trying this, it won't work. I can't cope with this. I didn't cause this pandemic, right? And so, yes, NP, yes. And let's try reframing them as well. Yes, definitely NP, right? Good job, guys. Negative predicting, good job. My students are easily distracted. I can help them and get more present by teaching mindfulness. Yes, awesome, right? And awesome, Charlene. We also saw from Charlene, Miss Patterson, Nathan, Janice, great work, guys, yes. And Heidi, good job. I need to modify my approach or lesson so the students are more engaged. Excellent. And because of time, we're just going to get into the debrief, and then we're going to, so you guys got all of the answers, right? So we're just going to leave this. We are going to share these in the slides. We got a 10-minute notification And we definitely love Sean to be able to hop back in and close off nicely.
All right, thank you, Tonia. All right. Well, this slide is we call this Nikoi, right? Because I had a student. I think this was my second contract year. His name obviously was Nikoi, and it was easy to see the potential that he had. Obviously, he was an intellectual kid. He was emotional. He did want to be involved with the group, but he was getting ostracized, right? But he wanted to fight that so that he could be a better student. He could be respected by his peers and just be the best person he could be. So just one simple thing that we did was oh, my bad. I thought you were trying to tell me something. Was that I made him the hall monitor where he would take the students to the lunchroom, to the cafeteria. I know it might sound very rudimentary, but what happened is I would stay in the back so much that the students didn't even know I was following them. He took them down the stairs like he was the teacher. And over time, they respected him because of his fairness. He gained confidence. He participated in class. I mean, I think he just got his master's degree, actually. And it's not because of me, obviously. I'm not saying that. But the point is that he had a breakthrough with his group, right? And they had built a camaraderie. And the camaraderie that you find in the Fourth Circuit, the emotional quality of love, when that is combined with Second Circuit and insight, the group thing, then groups work together and not because they're given a role, right? Now, just from the last circuit where we went through emotion, say you have a student that is intractable or is, let's say, a lot of times the way to diffuse certain emotion is you play on that opposite polarity. When they're extra boisterous and verbally abusive, sometimes deliberate stillness is the key. Like I've calmed down so many students that were ready to fight just by approaching them, and you put a hand on and what's going on? What's the problem? And that easy voice is a break in that consciousness, because generally what happens is when people could become reactionary, that reptilian brain starts to fire, and then they give them back the same energy. And then when you balance that with an opposing type of vibration, then it's like breaking through the fog, right? And they'll turn, and it's like they're almost caught off guard a lot of times. And they'll turn, and next thing you know, they're crying, and they're telling you everything that's going on with them, right? Let's go to really quickly. We have about 10 minutes, I think. This is the endocrine system and chakra system, right? We have at the top is pineal, pituitary, in the throat. We have the thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, heart center in the middle, adrenal glands, and the pancreas, and then the gonads. You have the ovaries and the testes in the middle. These are all hormonal centers and dense energy centers. And you might know, some people call that solar plexus in the middle a second brain, because there's so many nerve endings there. That's what we call them butterflies, right? Here is just a diagram of the chakra system, and it also parallels the endocrine system, right? Now, you might notice that if you're trying to put the laws together with these states of consciousness, that gender, which is not necessarily a qualification of sexuality, it's about frequency. It's not about personality. It's about vibration, right? The feminine and the masculine is contained on all things and all living things, and even in the things that we create, right? So it is about frequency and balancing and putting those things together to create, right?
I think
the parallels to the laws and states of consciousness, the adrenal glands are located above the gonads, but because the adrenal glands, the quality of that frequency of that vibration is lower than the gonads, this is why it's placed at the base with survival, right? But those energy centers are still very closely related or located within the body, right? conclusion.
Well, in conclusion, we hope that our discourse on love and how that translates to daily interactions in the classroom was shared with you. We hope that you understood the levels of consciousness to ground ourselves. And our 2 activities, although they were brief, they're just, we do have more information in our folder on how you could practice understanding, thinking about thoughts with your kids, as well as the mindfulness exercise. And we hope that you understood the levels of consciousness to ground ourselves, as well as the chakra system. If you have any questions.
We can do 5 minutes.
Yes.
Sure. And also we'll be putting, we'll put the slide presentation in the folder as well. And yeah. And not just the hands-on opportunities, but also group activities where they each have specific roles that will combine to form that result that you're looking for at the end. Thank you. All right.